The United Kingdom once stood as a proud leader in the global automobile industry. It was a nation that built icons: Mini, Jaguar, Land Rover, Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Aston Martin. These names carried prestige, power, and pride. For decades, the British car market symbolized craftsmanship, innovation, and class. But today, that legacy is being dismantled, not by internal failure alone, but by an external force that's been quietly, efficiently, and strategically rewriting the rules of the global car game. That force is China. If you've been following what's happening in the UK car market lately, you've probably noticed a dramatic shift. Sales of British-made cars are falling, local factories are closing, and dealership floors are increasingly filled with names that 10 years ago, most people in the UK couldn't even pronounce. BYD, MG, Morris Garages, now owned by China's SAIC Motor, NIO, Xpeng, Zeekr, Geely. Chinese automakers have launched an unstoppable offensive into the UK, and it's working. In 2025, Chinese-made electric vehicles accounted for nearly 30% of all EVs sold in the United Kingdom. That number may sound small, but it's a tidal wave compared to just 5 years ago, when China's presence in the UK market was almost invisible. Back then, consumers saw Chinese cars as cheap, unreliable, and unfamiliar. Today, the same consumers are praising their build quality, futuristic design, and most importantly, their prices. So what changed? It started with the electric revolution. When the UK government announced its ambitious plan to phase out petrol and diesel cars by 2035, it opened a door that China was already standing behind, ready to enter. While Western car makers were still debating battery sourcing and factory transitions, Chinese manufacturers had already built the infrastructure, the technology, and the supply chain needed to mass-produce EVs faster and cheaper than anyone else. The result? The UK market, once dominated by European and Japanese brands, suddenly became fertile ground for China's electric invasion. BYD, Build Your Dreams, is perhaps the best example. Within 2 years of launching in Europe, BYD became a household name, offering vehicles like the Atto 3, Dolphin, and Seal that rivaled Tesla's performance, but undercut its prices by thousands of pounds. UK customers loved the value. For £30,000, you could get a BYD with long range, premium tech, and a 5-star safety rating, features that European cars only offered at £40,000 or more. MG, under Chinese ownership, followed a similar path, resurrecting its British heritage but pairing it with Chinese affordability and modern EV tech. Suddenly, made in China no longer meant low quality. It meant low cost, high performance. This is where things began to unravel for British and European automakers. Jaguar, Land Rover, Mini, and even Vauxhall started feeling the pressure. Rising production costs, labor challenges, and supply chain disruptions made it nearly impossible to compete on price. A UK-built EV could cost 20 to 30% more than its Chinese equivalent, and that's before considering the incentives Chinese companies receive from their government. China heavily subsidizes EV manufacturing, battery production, and exports, allowing brands like BYD and Geely to sell cars abroad at prices Western competitors simply can't match. And that's precisely what's shaking the UK market to its core. Every month, more dealerships report slowing sales of legacy brands. British consumers are making practical decisions. They're not buying badges, they're buying technology and efficiency. And when they compare the spec sheets, Chinese cars are often winning hands down. A BYD Seal with 570 kilometers of range for £35,000 versus a Jaguar I-Pace with 470 kilometers for £55,000. The choice for most people is simple, but this isn't just a story about pricing. It's about strategy. China didn't just build cars, it built an ecosystem. The entire EV supply chain, from lithium mining and battery production to chip manufacturing and vehicle assembly, is dominated by Chinese companies. CATL, the world's largest battery producer, powers a huge percentage of global EVs, including those made by Tesla and BMW. This control gives Chinese automakers an unmatched advantage in scaling production, reducing costs, and maintaining technological superiority. The UK, on the other hand, has struggled to adapt. Post-Brexit trade barriers, a lack of domestic battery manufacturing, and weak government incentives have left British automakers behind in the global EV race. Projects like Britishvolt, once hailed as the UK's battery hope, collapsed under financial pressure. Meanwhile, China kept moving forward, launching gigafactories, investing in raw materials across Africa and South America, and signing long-term supply contracts with major global companies. By 2025, China wasn't just exporting cars, it was exporting dominance, and the UK was its most vulnerable target. Take MGAs. An example again. In 2024, MG sales in the UK skyrocketed by over 80%, making it one of the top 5 best-selling car brands in Britain. It was a Chinese brand selling a British name back to the British people. Irony? Maybe. But it worked. MG's ZS EV and MG4 models became mass favorites, undercutting competitors like Volkswagen's ID.3 and Kia's EV6 by thousands of pounds, while offering better features and longer ranges. Consumers didn't care where the car was made. They cared that it worked, was affordable, and looked good. And that's exactly what Chinese brands delivered. For UK dealerships and local manufacturers, the situation has become dire. Factories in Sunderland, Swindon, and Solihull are either cutting jobs or downsizing. Supply chains are strained. Investors are pulling back. The once thriving UK automotive sector, which used to contribute over £70 billion a year to the economy, is now struggling to stay afloat. Industry analysts warn that if things continue like this, the UK may become a mere import hub rather than a production powerhouse. Meanwhile, China's strategy is evolving. It's not just selling cars, it's buying the infrastructure too. Chinese companies have begun investing in charging networks across Europe and the UK, partnering with local governments to install fast charging stations. They're also funding EV research centers in London and Birmingham, creating a soft power presence that goes beyond cars. It's a long-term play. Own the market, own the future. And the UK government? Caught in the middle. On one hand, it wants to achieve its net zero goals and expand EV adoption. On the other, it faces mounting pressure to protect local industries and jobs. Should it welcome cheap Chinese EVs that make electric mobility affordable for everyone? Or should it impose tariffs and barriers to protect British manufacturers? It's a tough balancing act, and so far, no one has found the perfect answer. Some politicians are calling for urgent action. They argue that the UK should follow the United States and Europe in imposing trade barriers against heavily subsidized Chinese imports. The EU has already launched an anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese EV manufacturers, fearing that their artificially low prices are distorting competition. But others warn that restricting imports could backfire, making EVs more expensive and slowing down the transition to clean energy. So the question remains, can the UK car market survive China's onslaught? Analysts say yes, but only if the UK adapts fast. That means investing heavily in battery production, building a strong domestic EV supply chain, and offering incentives that make British cars competitive again. Otherwise, by 2030, China could own more than half of the UK's electric car market share, a scenario that many industry experts believe is already unfolding. There's also a cultural shift happening. Younger buyers don't see cars the way their parents did. For them, a car isn't about heritage. It's about innovation, design, and value. They don't care if the car was built in Oxford or Shenzhen. They care about range, charging speed, and technology integration. Chinese cars are loaded with cutting-edge tech, AI assistants, smart parking systems, AR dashboards, things that British cars either lack or offer at a premium. When the next generation of consumers makes its choice, legacy brands might find themselves outdated and outpriced. This story is not about villains and victims. It's about evolution and competition. China saw an opportunity in the electric revolution and acted faster than anyone else. It invested trillions, built supply chains, trained engineers, and created a national strategy that spanned decades. The UK, like many Western countries, relied too much on past glory and was slow to adapt. Now the consequences are unfolding in real time on British roads, where Chinese EVs outnumber British ones in growth, sales, and consumer trust. Some industry veterans argue that this is a wake-up call. It's not the end of the UK car market. It's a rebirth moment. If the country can learn from China's efficiency and innovation, it can still reclaim its place on the world stage. But that requires courageous leadership, long-term planning, and massive investment in green tech and manufacturing. Otherwise, the next chapter of the UK automotive industry will be written not in Coventry or Birmingham, but in Shenzhen and Shanghai. At the end of the day, consumers decide who wins. And right now, consumers are choosing China. The reason is simple: better cars at better prices. If British brands want to survive, they'll have to out-innovate, not just out-argue. Because the era of national loyalty in cars is fading fast, and the era of global competition has truly begun. The UK car market is collapsing, yes, but it's also transforming. What looks like a crisis today might be a revolution tomorrow. And whether that revolution is led by British hands or Chinese ones depends entirely on what the UK does next.